think you're gonna need to close it and reopen it.
Sorry, folks, had myself muted because I'm trying to figure out what happened. I've never had that happen before. I am at the university where I do all my streams, and we've never had it just completely tank like that. So, what we will do is we will be basically, gentlemen, if you guys would like to just give a really brief synopsis of what you just said, because otherwise, people will have to click on multiple links. So we can start it as if this is the start. And if you guys want to give a summary of what you talked about previously, if you want to get summarize it in 2 minutes, we can go from there. And I will open it as usual. So, ladies and gentlemen, thrilled to have you here with Paul Vander Klay and TJump, as they will be summarizing the brief discussion that they've previously had on TJump's naturalistic pantheism, and then from there discuss whether or not it is reasonable. So, in a very brief couple of minutes, if you guys want to just share kind of where you've gotten to at this point in the discussion, just to kind of catch up any of those people who have not heard what you've discussed before. Thanks for being here, gentlemen.
Yeah, thanks. So, by naturalistic pantheism, what I mean is essentially just an eternal, all-powerful nature. So if you take all the properties of God, the omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, personal, eternal, and conscious, remove all of them except eternal and all-powerful, you get naturalistic pantheism. And that's essentially what it is. I don't actually believe in naturalistic pantheism. It's just a counter argument against theism for me. So I use it to demonstrate that the arguments and evidence used for theism can work equally as well for a non-God, which is naturalistic pantheism, because it isn't conscious, and so it's something separate than the theist idea of a god. And the point of this is to show that the evidence and argument doesn't work. Like if you have, um, uh, if you say that there's a box and we don't know what's inside the box, but the box weighs 2 pounds, you say, well, there's a rabbit in the box. We know there's a rabbit in the box because it weighs 2 pounds. Well, I can say, well, that doesn't actually indicate a rabbit because the 2 pounds can be explained by a lizard. So it's not evidence of a rabbit. And that's essentially what I'm doing with naturalistic pantheism, is I'm showing all of the evidence and arguments for theism can work equally as well for a non-God, naturalistic pantheism. We also went into a little bit of my personal viewpoint of what I think about my model of morality, where morality is an abstract concept, an abstract relation, kind of like triangles. Um, I'm sure. So, Paul, were you interested in how my personal views account for morality, or how I would account for morality under the naturalistic pantheism hypothesis?
I guess so. I'm a pastor, and I watched you talk to Pete Enns, and it was kind of interesting to me. And so I heard naturalistic pantheism, and I thought, well, that's kind of an interesting perspective, and I wonder how that works, and I wonder how that works in a I wonder how that works in a human being, and I wonder how that is fleshed out in a human life. You know often, maybe I'm a bit of a misfit on the modern debate channel debate that wants to debate items in the abstract. Maybe that's not it is or isn't what the channel is about. I'm As a pastor, I'm far more interested in the intersection between people's worldviews and how they decide to live it out. And so, again, I listened to that. So I've sort of been trying to figure out Tom a little bit here, just because I'm a rather nosy pastor who perhaps is uninvited, and maybe Tom doesn't want to talk to a pastor. I'm sure you're not afraid to talk to a pastor, but I was a little bit more curious about how that works for you, and what it works for you. And I hear you're an atheist, and and sound like some sort of evidentialist. So I'm just sort of curious. I mean, you can have all these ideas and they sort of float abstractly, but I'm kind of curious about how it works out in life. And so then I ask questions about morality, because morality gets into the playing field of action. And, so I try to figure out, well, let me ask you this. Let me ask it this way, Tom. What do you want?
What do I want?
What do you
I'd
want?
say happiness.
And happiness is an experience, a feeling,
Yep.
and you want to maximize happiness. You want to have as much happiness as possible between now and the day you are no longer conscious.
Yes, essentially.
Okay. And that's interesting to me, because in some ways you're at least the tiny little slice of you that I know, are the perfect illustration of a sermon of what our culture seems to offer as the summum bonum, as the greatest thing possible, which is to have the best series of experiences from whatever point in time we gain consciousness until we imagine we lose consciousness. And so that is what you want out of life.
Yeah, so there could always be more than that. There could be a greater goal out there, but we just don't have any reason to believe there is yet. So I can create the idea of a higher goal that I don't have yet. Maybe solve world hunger or end all suffering or cure death, those kinds of things. Give everyone the greatest happiness or joy or worth or value, or try to meet some level or standard, some independent standard of morality and purpose, like a undiscovered law of nature or something, and that should be our morality and purpose. We can always come up with greater purposes than that, but right now, the only evidence I see is that the greatest purpose we can demonstrate is that happiness is the one we know exists and is a good purpose to have, that we should apply to everyone. Everyone should be able to be happy as much as possible, regardless of any other hypothetical greater goal that may exist. I think that the happiness metric should um, or supersede any kind of greater metric that we could hypothesize about, because it seems to be the one that we can demonstrate exists.
Is there any problem with having happiness at the expense of another?
Yes,
Why?
because they should have happiness too.
What evidence do you have for that?
That's my claim of morality. My moral intuition gives me that evidence.
So it's a claim based on intuition.
Right, morality is indeed a claim based on intuition.
Is that intuition instinctive, or do each of us have our own intuitions with respect to it?
Um, uh, Both. I don't know why those would contradict. So it is instinctive in the fact that it's like from evolution, and evolution can give us many different kinds of intuitions, but as a society, we usually tend to aggregate towards the same kinds of intuitions on morality in general.
Is that a human function or a function of a particular strain of human society?
I believe it is more of a strain of all social mammals, maybe social non-mammals as well, but it seems to be true of all social mammals that they have this.
Do you read much history?
Used to, not as much anymore. Now I focus on philosophy.
Do you think the Roman Empire shared this idea of happiness, that happiness should be universal and that it should apply equally to all?
No, I would say some of them did. I mean, there were definitely hedonists among them, but I would say that they had different philosophies, but their intuition about morality was largely the same, about social groups and social norms, and about giving other people the same rights as much as possible as us. But it was harsher. So, like in certain kinds of pygmy societies, you give everyone in your tribe the same kinds of rights that you have for the most part. But the people in the other group, they don't have any rights. You essentially just kill them as soon as you see them.
Right.
So it seems to me that morality changes along with social progress. And as we don't need those harsh interpretations anymore, then people become more empathetic and are able to see other life forms as the same moral status as they are.
Why is that progress?
Well, I define it as progress because I think that the end goal is giving everyone as much happiness as possible, not just you. And so I do see a problem when you try to have happiness at the expense of someone else. That does contradict my view of morality.
I don't understand the evidence for that position though, because I don't understand the evidence for that telos, that end.
So in philosophy, the basis of morality comes from moral progress, moral intuition, and answering dilemmas. Those are essentially, it could be an undiscovered law of nature, it could be an abstract or a platonic form. There's lots of different things it could be, but the evidence for it is just our moral intuition, the moral progress, and the moral dilemmas that we answer, which seem to all indicate that moral beings are all equivalent. We should all treat them the same. They should all be happy as much as possible. And that's essentially the general consensus about morality, is that we should make people as happy as possible, everyone,
But that's a general consensus today.
right?
That certainly isn't a that's we can't can we make an argument that that's a naturalistic position?
Yes, you can. That's like, you can say it's a basis of evolution that gave us that. So there's definitely ways to do that. You could say it's an undiscovered law of nature. That could be a naturalistic position. You could say maybe it's a platonic form. That could be considered a naturalistic position. There are definitely ways to argue that.
Do you think I should have that position?
Yes,
Why?
because it seems intuitively correct to me. I think that if you don't agree that everyone should equally has the right to be happy and should be happy, I think you are wrong. I think they should.
What if that position doesn't make me happy? What if you holding this position doesn't make me happy?
That's no too bad. I think that everyone has the right to be happy, and so if it makes me happy to have it, then your position that doesn't make you happy for me to have it would be a contradiction in terms, because everyone should be happy. And so if I'm happy in my position of believing that everyone should be happy, then your belief should not overwrite mine. It would be immoral for you to impose your will on me involuntarily. That would be bad. That'd be a bad thing.
It would be bad because it doesn't make you happy? I
Pretty
mean,
much, yeah.
happiness is the greatest good. So the difficulty I have is obviously in any society, um, people come into conflict over happiness all the time, people who share a home. Um, and the difficulty is that, well, very quickly in just about any human relationship, you begin to discover that um, there are there are many zero-sum situations in which happiness um, probably is not attainable to both. When my child wakes up in the middle of the night and vomits, it does not make me happy to get up out of bed and clean up my child's vomit. Why
What,
should I
really?
do that?
It's not. You don't find that fun?
I, trust me, I've done it plenty. I have 5 kids.
So
It doesn't make me happy when my dog poops on the floor, and I have to, I mean the world is full of unhappinesses, and one might argue that we currently live in a society which is about as happy as any, and yet I don't know that. You see, part of my difficulty is that I'm not sure that happiness is really a terrific goal. Partly because, like many experiences, it is temporal. And Jordan Peterson has a lovely observation that if you want to be really happy, take cocaine. You can take it very quickly, and then you'll have maximum happiness, but you have it very quickly, and then it's gone. And so, if we made happiness the ultimate end, then perhaps we should all OD on cocaine at some point, and then we slip off into the great nothing. But none of us would find that to be a very satisfactory world. And so I'm skeptical about happiness as the summum bonum.
so my more technical definition, what I'd say, freedom of choice would be the greatest moral standard. So I think that everyone should have the right to choose for themselves, and freedom from imposition of others without their consent. And in whatever they're doing, whether or not they choose to be happy or not, or whether it makes them happy or not, they should have the freedom to choose one way or another. So from my perspective, happiness is just what we call freedom. It's not really the emotion itself. So I think the highest standard of what morality should be is freedom. People should be free from involuntary impositions. That is what I think is the highest moral standard. So happiness is just an easy way to describe that.
Have you been watching Kanye West at all much?
No, no, I
Okay.
refuse. No.
Kanye West has gone, Kanye West does what Kanye West wants, but he's been on this Christian kick lately, and it's been sort of fascinating. And the best I can tell, he's been on this Christian kick lately because unlike you and I, who have limited resources, limited fame, limited reach, Kanye West has far more resources than we do. Um, he had the choice to sleep with just about any woman he wanted to, buy just about any item he wanted to, do all of this. And he has come to the point that he has decided to be, I don't know what kind of Christian, but the amalgamation of Christians around him is really pretty odd. But part of what I see in human beings is perhaps most easily exemplified in Kanye West, sort of, in a Plato's Republic type thing, where Plato says we can look at a human being by looking at a city. Well, we can look at a human being by looking at Kanye West. I find often that people, when they have maximized freedom, it often makes them unhappy because what they quickly do is basically their desires run amok, and we see this in children. We often call them spoiled. They're often most unhappy. And we see these in adults. You look at people like Howard Hughes or any enormously wealthy person who has far more opportunity than we have. I seldom find it makes them happy. In fact, at the end of their happiness train, they usually start looking for something like meaning, which often involves some degree of voluntary suffering.
Right. So I think freedom of choice supersedes happiness. So if you voluntarily suffer and you have the freedom to choose that, then that would be the moral good. So I don't think it's specifically hedonism is not what I argue for. My argument is that freedom, the freedom to choose for yourself is the highest good. The freedom from involuntary imposition of will.
Are you married?
No,
Do you have any children?
nope.
I'm skeptical about your freedom argument simply because, it's really funny. I work with a lot of homeless people, and so there's a good friend of mine who is homeless, and the reason he stays homeless, when I ask him, is he says, I don't want to pay someone to annoy me. And what that means is, if he would in fact use his monthly disability check to go into a room and board, that person would put constraints on him. And so we might think about this individual as someone who could exemplify your ideal. But if you actually look at his life living as a homeless person, it's anything from happiness. You and I both, I think, probably live inside. We pay a mortgage or we pay rent, we pay our internet fees, we do all of these things. And so again, there are all these trade-offs. And so once again, I I don't know. First we talked about happiness, and now we're talking about freedom from constraint. And I'm a little bit skeptical as to whether or not that actually produces happiness.
Well, again, so happiness isn't the goal here. Happiness was just an easy way to describe morality when you first started the conversation. So my goal is just freedom. So in the case of the homeless guy, it would be immoral for me to force him into a home against his will. That would be immoral. It's moral for me to allow him to choose for himself whether he wants to do it or not. So she has the right to choose, and it's immoral for me to take that right away from him, in my view.
Do you want his freedom more or his happiness?
Freedom.
You want his freedom more. And your assertion is that his freedom is limited to the point that he doesn't impose or restrict freedom on others.
Right. It would be, for example, it would be moral for me to offer him a home and say, "Would you like to live here?" And then he has the right to choose. It would be immoral for me to force him into a home without his ability to choose. So freedom of choice there is the highest thing. I can still do moral actions by giving him things that if he can choose to accept or not, and I can do immoral things by taking things away from him, taking his choice and freedom away from him. And that's how my view explains morality and immorality. It's the freedom of choice and giving people things that they may like, or assisting them, or giving them the option to do things versus taking it away.
In your system, where do our desires that we choose come from?
Our brains.
Okay. Um, are they built into us by our parents and our upbringing?
Oh yeah, right. So biology, nature, and nurture would be probably the two sets of where we get our values from.
So if, let's say, let's say someone decides they want to sit in a chair and play computer games all of their life, that would be a life well spent because they exerted their choice.
Well, no. So morality isn't about a life well spent. Morality is about freedom. So it would be immoral for me to force them to stop without their consent. It would be moral for me to give them as many options and opportunities to do other things that I can. But it's not about whether or not a life is well spent. That's not what morality defines. Morality defines like an action. Like if I do something to someone else, is this a good action or a bad action? But it doesn't determine whether what they're doing is a good life or not. That is a different question.
Do you have an idea of what a good life is?
Um, Not exactly. So I think that it's subjective. I think that what determines a good life is up to the individual, essentially.
Is there such a thing as addiction?
Yes.
What is that?
Uh, Obsession over a specific kind of a thing where you can't get over it.
Well, surely it's isn't if someone is an alcoholic, let's say, surely all they do is choose to drink, and so they're exercising their free choice, and no one should get in the way of them exercising their free choice.
Right. I would agree with that. I would say that it's immoral for me to force them to stop without their consent. Now, I should give them the opportunity to stop, give them as much assistance as I can, but they should have the right to choose one way or the other, whether they actually want that.
How do you know what is a good thing to do, let's say like drinking, and what is a bad thing to do, like drinking all the time, to choose drinking, or something else to choose, like, I don't know, watching Netflix? How do you decide that one is a good thing and one isn't?
I leave that up to the individual. Either could be a good thing, either could be a bad thing. There are people who might be better off drinking all the time, and there are people who might be better off watching Netflix all the time.
How do you choose for you? I
Um,
mean, surely you must have some idea of what a good life is, and you must be making choices in pursuit of that good life.
well, actually, no, I'd say I don't know what a good life is, and I'm making choices to try as many things as I can to discover what a good life is.
So that then would be a good life, to have the freedom to choose as many things as possible in order to discover a good life.
I'm not sure I would describe it like that. I would say that I don't know what a good life is, but I think everyone should have the freedom to try and explore that as much as possible. And they may discover a good life or they may discover a bad life, but as long as they have the freedom to decide that for themselves, that's a moral world. Whether they choose good or bad or apathy or playing video games, as long as they have the freedom to choose for themselves, that's a moral world. And I think that even if we discovered there's some kind of good life thing out there, if we forced people into it without their consent, that would be an immoral world. That would be bad. We shouldn't do that.
Is this freedom a product of the agricultural revolution or the industrial revolution?
Sort of. So we have limited freedom right now. We're not totally free. Like we're stuck in gravity and time. We're not free of those things. But the freedom we do have is due to technology and like the agricultural revolution and technological scientific revolutions. So the limited freedom we have right now is due to those things. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, that's why we're making moral progress in the world. We're giving people more freedoms due to technology. We haven't gotten to the point where we're all free yet, unfortunately.
If it were possible to put, I don't know, virtual reality headphones on everyone and put them in really nice, easy chairs like you, and just have them stay in that condition until they expire, would that be a good vision of the world? We're not going to make them do it, but perhaps we could construct a video game or a virtual reality that would be so pleasing to them that they would forsake anything that you and I consider to be normal in terms of human interaction, or leaving our living rooms or things like that. Is that would that be
It
moral
would
progress in your mind?
Yes, it would be moral to give them the option, and they can choose to do it or not. So yes, it would be moral to present them with the option to do that.
So when, for example, the creators of Farmville build a video game and put it on Facebook, that I have a lot of older people in my church, and so I understand Farmville and people who like playing it all the time. And if you'd ask them if they choose to play Farmville all the time, they do. But the creators of that video game knew very much what they were doing when they built that video game, and they put, as you well know, gaming subroutines into that program, so people would actually choose to play it. Is that a moral or an immoral thing to do?
Neither. It's amoral. So since they still have the choice to play it, it's up to them whether or not they do. It isn't immoral to put those in. It's just actually that's a part of what makes it enjoyable is the fact that those things trigger the dopamine in your head, which is why you enjoy doing it. So that's actually the choice for people to play is moral. Giving people the choice to do it is moral, and forcing them one way or the other would be immoral. So just designing a video game is amoral. It doesn't do anything. The only immorality would be forcing people to play against their will, and the only morality would be giving them freedom to choose for themselves.
Even if, we perhaps understand the addiction qualities of alcohol, but certainly we can also understand how we could make computer games and other simulations addictive in the same way.
Right. So I mean, I don't see any problem with addiction if people like to drink or do things that are addictive. I think they should have the freedom to choose to do that. I think it would be immoral to restrict their freedom and not allow them the opportunity to do that.
Does this apply to children?
No, because children have a limited mental capacity, and so we have to restrict their freedoms in order to protect them from greater immoralities of like what they like. We have to stop children from running into the street, which restricts their freedom. But if we don't, they're going to get run into the street and get hit by a car, which is going to restrict their freedom even more. So we do one thing to restrict their freedom to prevent something else, which would restrict their freedom even more. So in the case of children and people with mental disabilities who don't have full cognitive faculties, in those cases, we do restrict their freedom simply pragmatically. I don't think it's right that we do it. I think it's necessary that we do it. But so it would not apply to those cases.
At what age would we make this decision?
I'll leave that up to society. I have no idea. Like
Well,
there
you
are
don't have
people who
children.
are older than 18 who shouldn't have the right to choose, and there are people who are younger who should. So like, I think Donald Trump should not have the right to choose. That would be great.
No podcast is complete without the mention of Donald Trump.
What's the law on the internet? Poe's law, where any talk on the internet leads to a mention of Hitler. Well, now it's just going to be Donald Trump.
That's right. It'll just be Donald Trump. Well, yeah, I don't know. You've got an interesting perspective on the world, but I don't know if I quite buy that. Well, maybe if it's that part of my issue with naturalism is, well, let me ask you this question. Are we so the summum bonum is this freedom from outside restraint. Okay. So that's what that the greatest life is, a life where people can choose whatever they can they can reasonably obtain.
No, no. So I would say that it's the freedom to choose anything. So I think the highest moral standard would be like if we gave someone created the computer program, like you said, where they can just get whatever they want. Like if you want cocaine, you can just have mountains of cocaine and take as much of it you want and have it never hurt you. It just gives you the high all the time. You should have the right to choose that if you want, and not be affected by the negative consequences by nature. That would be like the most moral standard. So if we all lived or had the option to live in a computer game where we could just do whatever we wanted to and didn't have to worry about hurting other people in those choices or didn't have to worry about natural consequences with those choices, that would essentially be the heaven essentially of this worldview, the end goal, where everyone has the freedom to choose anything they want so long as it doesn't hurt other people, and they can just do it to whatever extent they want and not have to worry about natural consequences.
Have you read Brave New World?
Um, I, I think so, a long time ago.
Do you know, well, maybe you don't know the premise of Brave New World, but basically people are bred to desire that which is appropriate to their station in life. So the gammas are bred to do menial work and so on and so on up the chain, so that because desire is a very funny thing. I desire things that I grew accustomed to as a child. And I mean, desire isn't just sort of out there. The person who, let's say, the person who has a cocaine habit desires cocaine and looks to steal in order to facilitate their habit. We would call that immoral because stealing is wrong because you're getting you're getting into getting in the way of the desire for someone else. So potentially the best world would be if we could sort of hook everyone up and give them the well, let me ask you this question. Is this choosing that we're doing when we're desiring actually a choice, or in your naturalistic pantheism or your atheism, is choice itself an illusion?
Well, I tend to lean more towards the choices and illusion camp, but for my world, for my definition of morality, it doesn't make a difference. Like if it's a deterministic process by nature, kind of like a compatibilism, like Dan Dennett defines, that's totally fine. That would be the choice, is that it's a choice limited by our neurological capabilities. Or if it's like a free will kind of a choice, that's totally fine. Either way, the choice is the highest standard, regardless of whether or not it's a naturalistic process or a supernatural process. So it doesn't really make a difference in my worldview, which is the case. But to address your earlier point, like if someone bred someone to have a specific desire, I would consider that immoral because you're imposing a desire on them which they didn't have consent in. So I would say that there has to be some level of freedom for the person to essentially explore the world as a child or whatever, to determine their own values to some extent. And imposing certain values on them, that there's like breeding them to have certain values, I would consider to be immoral.
But you're not quite sure whether all desires aren't in fact bred into us by our nature and nurture.
Well, I would say they probably are, but that's totally fine. The nature part specifically, and like the nurture part, if you bred someone to specifically fit some kind of social role, I would say that would be immoral. But there's certain things you can teach them that don't limit their capabilities and choice, but give them more opportunity and choice. So you can give them certain values which would be moral as opposed to immoral, like learning is good or something, or um, don't treat others with harm. That's those kinds of values which allow them to think. Critical thinking. Critical thinking is a great example. Giving them those kinds of values will allow them to have more freedom over what they choose and not less. And so those kinds of values would be good to instill in people because it doesn't determine what they're going to value beforehand. It lets them just choose for themselves.
Is the value of the freedom determined by the range of options? For example, if when I was growing up, I ate tuna fish sandwiches every day in school. Now my mother asked me if I'd like to eat something else, and I said no because I'm sort of a rut person. And every day she made tuna fish sandwiches for me. Now it could be that my in my youthful ignorance, I had no idea of the glories that awaited me if I chose peanut butter and jelly. But because of my youthful ignorance, I chose from the limited menu I had available to me, and I ate tuna fish. Was my mother wrong in not forcing me to try peanut butter and jelly?
No, I think
Or
she was moral. I think she was moral to give you tuna sandwiches. So if you asked for tuna sandwiches and she provided you tuna sandwiches, that is perfectly moral. That is a really moral thing to do. You had a great mom. I think it would be immoral to force you to have like peanut butter sandwiches that you didn't want to have, or celery or broccoli or any of those things. That's immoral. Don't force that on kids. But especially not me. Just don't know. So, but I think that it would be moral for her to give you the option and say, so here's a peanut butter sandwich and here's a tuna sandwich, and you can try both. It's up to you. That would be the highest moral thing she could do. Forcing you to eat peanut butter sandwiches would be immoral, and just providing you with the tuna sandwich that you asked for would be moral. But providing both and giving you the option is the highest moral standard there.
so if young me was sitting around watching TV all afternoon, and my mother said, you should probably learn the violin or go outside and play with friends. The moral thing to do would be to let me as a child choose. The immoral thing would have been for her to shut off the TV and say, I'm limiting your TV time to 1 hour a day, and you need to find something else to do with your mind.
If you were an adult, yes, that would be immoral. Given the fact that children don't have the cognitive space to be able to function in the world, and we have to place limitations on them to make them function in the world so that we don't have to fear the natural consequences of not doing so, we have a justification for limiting children's freedom. But if you were an adult, yes, that would be immoral for your mother to do. Like if you were like a 30-year-old guy sitting in your basement playing video games, and your mom comes in and shuts off your TV, like no, he's an adult. He has the right to choose to do that if he wants to. It's immoral for you to like force him to stop. That's just like imprisonment, sort of.
What if I'm a 30-year-old living in, actually, when I stay with my mom, when I sleep in her basement. I always make jokes about that. Mom, I'm living in your basement. What if I'm a 56-year-old guy who's living in my mother's basement, and all I want to do is play computer games, and she wants to kick me out?
Well, it's her home. Since she has the property rights, she's justified in kicking you out. The moral thing to do would be to let you stay there. Like I tend to go with the whole Jesus turn the other cheek thing and the Janus absolute nonviolence. That's the moral standard. So it would be moral for her to let you stay there. And it's technically a little immoral to kick her out, but since it's her property rights and you're imposing on her, she has that right. So it's immoral for you to stay there against her consent because it's her house. So she has the right to kick you out.
Interesting. Um, I'm also a little fascinated by, again, the question of choice, because choice is pretty determinative in your system, and and we seem to have some difficulty figuring out actually where choice comes from, because if I willfully, if I willfully train a child, let me say this, if I consciously train a child to be dependent, let's say dependent on me, that would be immoral. But I'll tell you, as a pastor, I see a lot of situations where we might call this codependence, where in fact the mother is, or the father is, very much training the child, and the child's tastes and desires according to the needs of the parent, and the parent is completely unconscious about their decision to do that, and people spend 30-40 years living out those scripts. But the whole time, if you ask them, they will basically tell you this is the right thing, they're choosing it. And that's, in your mind, this is something that just is okay.
Well, no, I would say you can do immoral things without realizing it. Like you can hurt someone and impose on them without realizing you're doing it. It's still immoral, even though you think it's moral. So it is definitely possible for parents to impose immoral restrictions and deliberately force children to believe something, whether they realize it or not. So, in the most moral outcome would be if we could just understand what the best way to raise children is, to give them the most freedom of choice and opportunity to decide for themselves, and just use that method to raise children. That would be the highest moral standard, to make sure that parents don't accidentally, involuntarily impose on their children. We don't really know what that is. We're kind of just figuring it out, like you said. So it's kind of just do the best you can with what you got, kind of a thing. And it's, if you do things wrong, I mean, that's kind of the situation we're in. We're gonna do things wrong, whether we want to or not. You just try to do the best you can with what you got.
Is there any final consequence for moral or immoral behavior?
As far as we know, no, but there could be. We can always like come up with a hypothetical karma situation where your actions do have eternal consequences. But as far as I know, there's no evidential reason to suppose that there is.
So Hitler, Stalin, and Mao all got away with it.
Well, they died, so they didn't really get away with it.
Well, death isn't a problem, right, in your system?
Well, it is actually. Death is immoral, so because it's an involuntary imposition on your will. So death is bad in my world. We should solve death. We should absolutely solve death. That would be good.
But if someone chooses to die, so suicide is a moral act.
Yes. So if you want to die, well, it would be moral for you to help someone to die if they wanted to die. So euthanasia would be a moral thing in my worldview. Death.
How do you deal with time and choosing? For example, let's say I had a crappy day today. I debated TJump, and all the comments said, "Boy, he totally owned me. He destroyed me." I go home, and my wife said, "I had a terrible day at work," and then my kid says something I don't like. I said, "I am unhappy. I choose to die." And then I go to the death clinic down the street, and they give me a painless way to die. I mean, part of the difficulty we have with choice is that we as choosers are pretty fickle with our choosing.
Right.
So
So,
if I choose to die today because I had a crappy day, that's a moral choice.
well, no. So again, because we have biological limitations and we can be upset, it kind of like, it's like the child example, where since we don't have our real cognitive faculties there, we have to place limitations. Like, okay, if you really want to die, we're going to give you like a week, and if you still want to come back and you're diagnosed with major depression, then we'll give you the freedom to die. But we can't just give it to you immediately after an emotional episode, because of the same reason we couldn't give it to a child, is that you're impaired by these biological limitations, which may or may not be representative of what you really desire. So we have
When am I not having a biological moment?
right. So we define that as certain kind of cognitive freedoms. Like if you're in a normal, rational state of mind, as far as we can tell, and you aren't impaired by anything, then we consider that the highest degree of freedom that we can have biologically.
I know a fair number of manic depressive people. They're when they're manic, they're really happy. When they're depressed, they're really sad. When they're manic, they don't feel like they'll ever be depressed again. When they're depressed, they don't feel like they'll ever have joy again. And you would say that this is abnormal for them.
Yes, that is definitely an abnormal, like, mental phenomenon.
So, what is a normal mental phenomenon?
Oh, we just define that. I'd give that up to psychology and science to try and give you a description of that. It's outside of my level of expertise.
Is it normal for people to kill themselves?
Um, Not exactly. So, if there are cases where people's lives are objectively bad and suicide can be the correct option for many people. So, in those cases, I would say yes. In certain cases where you just have like a manic depressive episode, or you just had a really bad day or something, those cases I would say no. So in the cases, and you can differentiate these, it's like, because there are certain countries that do provide suicide assistance, and they have ways to differentiate between these, and I think those are the way they do it is right. So they place limitations on it to show that is this really uh, a pervasive problem in the person's life, and they may actually be better off not living because they're just in so much abject suffering that it's not worth it, and that it'd be immoral for us to force them to live against their will. And in those cases, yes, it would be moral to help them commit suicide. And there's some cases like manic depressives and people who had a really bad day. In those cases, we have to limit them because it's just a temporary thing. They're highly likely to get over it. And so, given the limited knowledge we have, we would not uh, assist them in suicide because we can't really know if their life is really that bad. And so we have to place some kind of limitations given our limited knowledge of, well, is this person's life really, really that bad and they do deserve the freedom to die, or is it just kind of a manic depressive episode? And because of the limitations we have to kind of place those limitations given the best, try to make the best decision we can given the situation. If we had omniscience and we could just tell one way or the other, then we could know, okay, this person would be better off and we should definitely help them to die, or this person was just in a manic episode and they'll be get fine. But we don't have that, so we have to place these limitations because of our limited knowledge.
And so when you say we, this is society that it's putting a constraint on these people's choice in that moment.
Well, no. So if someone wants to die, they're free to kill. Not we're going to help them. So if we're a doctor and we're going to give you a pill, that's not your freedom. You don't have any right to that pill. It's my pill. So we're going to decide: is it moral for us to help you commit suicide, or is it immoral for us to help you commit suicide? That's the question. It's not a limitation on the person unless they're like a paraplegic, in which case that's where the real up and talk to them and say, I'll do whatever I can in my power to help improve your life, but ultimately I'm going to leave you the freedom of choice of whether you're going to kill yourself or not.
But when you're talking to them, aren't you monkeying with their will?
Oh no, because they have the choice to listen or not. So it's their freedom. If I forced them to listen, then yes. If I like tied them down and just plugged earphones in and forced them to listen to me, yes, that would be absolutely immoral. But as long as they're freely choosing to listen, then no.
And when you say force, you mean physically force.
Yeah, essentially.
But if you were I don't know, if you were a dramatically beautiful woman and it was a man up on the rail who was attracted to women, and she looked at him and used her powers of beauty to suggest that perhaps if he climbed down from the rail, she might go on a date with him, that would not be forcing him.
No, that would not be forcing him because that's his choice. That's an internal thing. So the immoral thing is an external thing imposed on you against your will. Since that's purely internal, it's a part of who you are. That's not being forced. That's purely voluntary.
So if we as a society learned that Apple's marketing was in fact so effective to make them the most the most powerful company in the world, and that people after watching Apple commercials simply could not go out but buy MacBook Airs with really lousy keyboards, that would be okay because in every case people choose to do it themselves, even if even if they go bankrupt, or perhaps a gambling addiction. That's a better illustration. So gambling addicts, that's okay.
Right. So if people want to gamble their money away, they have the right to make that choice. And it's immoral for us to force them to stop against their will in some sense. The moral situation would be let them gamble as much as they want and don't charge them any money, essentially. That would be the moral outcome, is like put them in a video game where they can just gamble and do whatever they want, no consequences. That's the moral outcome, is allow them to do it. It would be immoral for us to force them to stop without their consent.
But yet you recognize that all of this desire is a product of nature and nurture.
Right,
And so the desire itself is really rather illusory.
right. But that's totally fine. So in my definition of freedom, it's whether it's a neurological kind of a freedom determined by nature, that's totally fine. Or if it's supernatural kind of freedom determined by the supernatural, that's also totally fine. There's no real difference between the two.
But if another person exerts their will to, without physical constraint, but perhaps in other means, take over the choosing part of another person, that's wrong.
Well, no, that's a choice. So like what choice is fundamentally is that there's something in your brain that you see something and it causes an interaction that you want. So it's all determined. So the choices are in fact determined by something in your brain. So if I see an attractive woman and decide I want to get off the bridge to go on a date with her, that was a determined process in the brain, but it was still a choice by my brain. That's a choice my brain made. So those aren't different things, those are the same thing.
Well, why do you use moral and immoral then?
Because those are the descriptions. Like it would be, I'm not sure what you mean. Like,
But though, but each one of these desires, including our desires and our way of choosing what is moral and immoral, are simply the product of all of our nature and nurture that we have come to.
right?
Right. So the whole game of morality and immorality is also basically that same game.
Right, but that doesn't make it wrong. It's still descriptively accurate to call it morality and immorality. That wouldn't make it any less accurate.
But but again, the question I have is, where does wrong go and where does right go? And I think we're back to happiness.
What do you mean go?
Well, where does it finally end? Because a moral or an immoral system, I would imagine, seeks some good or tries to avoid some evil. Now, the good and the evil that you've said are, well, good is having freedom of choice, even though we've just said that all of our choosing is in fact determined. And
So
and and so then there is no freedom of choice.
remember, it's freedom of involuntary impositions on your will. So your will may be determined by itself, which is fine. There's no involuntary imposition there. It's only an involuntary imposition if someone else forces something on your will without your consent. If you're
Someone or
determined,
something. I mean, it could be, I mean,
right,
when
right.
when you're up on the bridge and you see the beautiful woman, it's actually your biological system that is saying, "Ooh, beautiful woman, chance to mate. I want, I'm climbing
So
off
that's
the
not a
rail."
problem. So that's not a problem. So anything that's internally in your head, that's a part of who you are, that's making determined processes, is not an imposition. That's just who you are.
But I don't
So,
understand what a problem is.
so like if somebody else physically forces you to stop from doing something that you want to do, like if I want to sit around and play video games all day, and you like tie me up and carry me off in something, that would be immoral. That's an involuntary imposition on my will. Because that's not something my brain is choosing. My brain is not consenting to this, being forced to do it without my consent.
But again, so what?
What do you mean, so what? So
Well,
that's
so
just
what? So I'm doing something immoral. So I'm raising my kids to be Christians, or I'm raising my kids to always bring me my slippers at the end of the day, or I'm raising my children to be, because actually having, wanting my children to be around me seems like a fairly biological thing. And if I get away with it, and by means, what I say, get away with it, I mean, perhaps no one limits my constraint of molding my children or my neighbors or my family or the other people I share a nation with. If I get away with it, well, then, we might have a game by which we say this is a problem and that's immoral or this is moral. But in the end, all I'm doing is I'm working out my program, which is naturalistic. And all we're all doing is working out our program. So I don't know why we play the game at all. Or
well.
maybe
So
the
I
game
can
itself is just a way to, I don't know, manipulate others.
So I can make up consequences, but that's irrelevant to morality. So morality is a measurement, kind of like height. You said you're 6'5", I'm 6'2". It doesn't matter if I get away with being 6'2". It's irrelevant. The fact that I'm 6'2" is still true, regardless of whether or not I want it to be true or not. So if someone does an immoral thing and forces something on someone without their consent, whether they get away with it or not is irrelevant. It's still immoral. So the fact that there's a consequence for the immorality doesn't change whether or not it's moral or immoral. It's just what it means to be objective, an objective fact.
So should I be moral?
Yes,
Why?
because it's moralist, what the word means.
So moral is a game that we play period, for no reason. In fact, we're not even sure we're playing it because all of our desires, whether they be moral or immoral, are of course naturalistically, they're by our birth or our nature. So I so why are we playing moral games?
I'm not sure what you mean. So it's moral to do it, which is leads to like the better world. So we try to attain the better world. You don't have to like you. That's the true of any worldview. Any worldview is like, should you follow God? Like, I can say I don't want to. It's just a game that you're playing in the exact same sense. I don't see what the difference is.
Well, you said a better world, and that's one thing that I've been trying to find out. Better for what?
Freedom. The best of all possible worlds is one where there is no involuntary imposition of will. Everyone has the freedom to choose for themselves. That is the best of all possible worlds. That's
The,
the
the
goal.
freedom to have the experience of choice, because we don't know that there's actual choice. We only know that there's an experience of choice.
So those are the same thing. Remember, if it's just the experience of choice and you're biologically determined by your mind, that is still choice. That is a kind of choice. So those are the same thing. There's no contradiction there. That's what Dan Dennett's compatibilism describes. So I'm totally okay with being determined by your brain and having your brain make choices. That's still a choice, even if it's determined by your brain.
I just think that's a very sad thing. I guess it's okay. I guess it's moral that I feel like that's sad. Maybe me saying it's sad is manipulative of you, in which it would be immoral, but
But
because I
why do you
can't
think it's sad?
because I think knowing people and watching people, well, it's something like C.S. Lewis makes the point, some child playing in the backyard because they don't know what a day at the beach is. And so they never choose to leave their backyard because that's all they know. And human beings, just like my dog and my cat at home, are, especially in this perspective, so subject to this. And so I I find it ironic that I find it ironic that people in I find it ironic that people in that have so much choice often are so sad.
Well, let me rephrase the question. What's the difference between a natural choice determined by our brains and a supernatural choice determined by supernatural something?
I don't think supernatural is a category.
Well, like I imagine you're Christian because you're a pastor, so you think there is a free will something, right?
I think there's really I'm a Calvinist, so I work funnily with determinism.
So is there a difference between a Calvinist choice, because that's we're determined in Calvinism too. So is there a difference between that and a natural determined choice?
Well, I'm sort of a compatibilist, so I don't like the word. I don't like free will. I prefer real agency. I think we do have choices, and I think our choices do have consequences. I think if there's I say there's sort of a group A and a group B. Group A are things that sort of go on their own. They're all fully determined by cause and effect. But then there are also choosers in this world, and I think human beings are choosers. Now that choosing is very much bound by certain things, but the compatibilism you describe isn't probably too far from mine. But I think that all of these choices actually pursue outcomes and goods and ends. And I think it is very common to do a funeral for someone and realize if they drank their life away, they chose poorly, and that there's probably blame due for their parents, there's probably blame due for society. That's a very live thing. But I just don't see where your morality goes outside of 0 to 80 consciousness. And with those restrictions, I have a hard time seeing how morality exists at all, besides just kind of a game that we rather subjectively apply to different things in society, because every society seems to play that game.
Could you tell me the difference between my view of morality and yours? How does yours not fall under that same criticism?
I think actually human beings are made for something, and they're made for glory, which means that the person that is sitting and spending their life in their mom's basement playing computer games, this is a loss because this person was made for more, even though they are choosing something poorly.
So couldn't I just say the same thing and say humans are made for freedom and then there's this freedom property, and so they are actually living out their maximum goodness?
Yeah, but that person is choosing to live in their mother's basement. and at every moment they're choosing that. That's why I asked you these questions about choice. I mean, we started with happiness and then we went to choice, but I would argue that that person living in their mother's basement is all along the way they're making that choice, but they are choosing poorly because they were actually made for something more.
So my question is that you said there's this glory thing, there's this
Yes.
glory property, and
Yes.
I'm saying there's this freedom property, and you're saying the freedom property is just a game we play, but the glory property isn't just a game we play. What's
Yes.
the difference between the two?
I think glory is best illustrated in, well, you can go into a field and, well, the Bible starts with a garden. And so here's a garden and God says, make it glorious. Take, tiny little apples that are small and tart and work those apples until we have something like we might see in our supermarket. That is glory. It's you take something and you find its potential and you bring its potential out of it. And that all along the way, that path usually involves sacrifice. It usually involves continually choosing. In fact, often that means that a good parent says to the child, I'm going to limit your screen time and I'm going to have you play outside. Even if you choose to watch TV all the time, I'm not going to allow you to do that. And I think, in fact, the decisions we make, the commitments we make, and the limitations that are all around us teach us the kind of strength that actually gives us greater power to choose, and usually in the direction of glory.
How is that not a game? Because you said mine was just a game we play. Why is that not just a game we play?
It doesn't end at 80.
What is
It doesn't end when we die.
Why does that make a difference? Like, for example, I can say my moral system doesn't. It applies to the world.
Miroslav Volf in The Breakdown of Yugoslavia noticed something about people. They noticed that, well, communism had been there for a long time and everyone was skeptical about God. And when their neighbors wronged them and they wanted to get even, they had to, in fact, inflict the pain and end their lives because there was no final justice. And Miroslav Volf made the observation that actually people who believe in another life and in a judgment day can, in fact, stay their hand and offer the guilty person far more choice because they believe that we actually don't get away with things here, which adds a whole new dimension to morality.
So if I make up a being and say that my morality is grounded after death in this made up being, does that make it no longer a game?
That would probably offer you better morality. And it might actually offer you the opportunity to give people more freedom instead of having to curtail their freedom here and now.
Well, it's the same system of morality. I'm just saying there's a being and it's describing the nature of this being. So why would that be any different?
Well, having actually a vivid conception of what could come after this might in fact infuse this world with the ability to offer other people more happiness, more freedom, and in fact the opportunity for glory.
Well, why can't naturalists do that? We can come up with afterlife scenarios. We can come up with ideas of what's after the afterlife.
Yeah, we could, but you didn't.
Right. That's because I don't say there's evidence for it, but it's not incompatible with my morality. So the fact that it can be added to my morality means that it would equally not be a game as yours. I just haven't added that in yet. I could. There's nothing.
Go ahead, James.
Thanks so much. I'll give you a chance to respond, but just want to let you know, normally we would have done the 2-minute warning to go into Q&A about at least 5 minutes ago. It's just been such a good conversation. I've been really reluctant because I'm intrigued, and also I'm I don't want to stop this from going. It's just been really good. If you guys have a little extra time, we could maybe give you another 5 to 10 minutes before the Q&A. But if you guys are, I want to get you out of here on time. In which case, we should probably go to the Q&A really quick.
Well, I think I got Tom's attention, but I appreciate the conversation, and yeah, it's hard to get going when you don't know each other, and I think we eventually found some traction, but I'm okay.
You got it. That was an interesting conversation, but I still don't. I still don't see the difference in between my model and your model. It seems like you can just add on something after life, and then it would be the same.
Sassy. All right. So thank you very much. I mean, if you want a chance to, maybe we should do a part 2, because this is probably we could pick up where we left off. So I'm going to jump into these questions. So thanks so much, both Paul and Tom. It's a pleasure to have you. As I mentioned at the start of the stream, these guys are both articulate. They're very authentic. So this has been a really good, just kind of organic discussion. So with that, I want to say thanks so much for your super chat. So let's see here. This is her name. I don't call her this. I mean, this is what she calls herself. Stupid Horror Energy, thanks for your super chat. She says, TJump, are you tickled pink? Seems like one of those trollish Steven Steens, so we'll get to his. TJump's Titanicus, this is when the stream shut down. Titanicus Garden said, TJump's brainwaves killed the stream. Very nice. Stupid Horror Energy says, I am Pizzazu. I think she's like obsessed with that demon character from Ghostbusters. I don't know. Stupid Horror Energy, thanks for your other super chat. She said, for Paul, going for the throat here, Paul. She says, what is God's excuse for allowing the Holocaust?
He's never told me.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. Praise I am that I am. Thanks for your super chat. They said, Yo, James, I foresee a mustache in your future. They mean, I don't know if they mean, I don't get it. Is it like is this some sort of cool slang that you guys both know about that I don't, where are you? Okay, I don't know. You mean Jim Majors? I don't get it. So, Amir Al-Shafra, thanks for your super chat. They said, if my body passes gas, but I don't want it to, but my digestive system needs to release it, but it imposes on my will, is my gas immoral?
Yes. The moral thing to do would be to make it so that your body doesn't have to do that, if we could.
Provocative. Very nice. I like that a lot. Next up, thanks for your super chat, Stupid Horror Energy. She says, do you realize that secular morality is multifaceted? And it's not just well-being, but also involves contracting. So I think that's for Paul. By contracting, I'm pretty sure she means like kind of an agreed upon contract.
Contract theory.
So I think if you want to respond, Paul, you can.
Is there a question in there?
No, some of the super chats are just comments. So this is I think she's saying like, hey, are you? If I put it in the form of a question, maybe saying, don't you think that you're portraying secular morality is a little oversimplified because it's not just about well-being? Aren't you leaving out the fact that it's about mutual contracts or agreements?
I certainly understand that there are mutual contracts and agreements. I don't know that I was debating all of secular morality. I was trying to figure out what Tom was thinking.
Gotcha. Take that, Sarah. All right. So Converse Contender, that's her real name. So thanks for your super chat. They said, tell Tom naturalistic pantheism doesn't negate theism, even if it's eternal. What do you think of that?
If naturalistic pantheism is the eternal thing and God isn't the eternal thing, then that would negate theism, I'm pretty sure.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. Next up, Stupid Horror Energy. Thanks for your super chat, Sarah. She's a strange one, but we're glad she's here. She says, and this is an interesting one because I think that this is one that somebody else in their super chat responded to. It was a war. She said 2 Samuel 12:15, after Nathan had gone home, the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife had born to David, and he became ill. Does this sound like a good God to you? My guess is that's for Paul.
Well, is it any better than us killing children who we believe are disabled enough to not warrant a level of happiness that we imagine?
Gotcha. Next up, Nick L. Olson. Thanks for your, let's see, super chat. They said, I'd like to ask TJump, are seatbelt laws immoral? Should people have the freedom to not wear seatbelts?
Yeah, so I would say that in the best of all possible worlds, you wouldn't need seatbelts. The only reason we force people to use them is because they are necessary to prevent a greater restriction, which is if you get hit with a car, you're going to die if you don't wear one. So the best of all possible worlds, the most moral situation is to not need seatbelts. We just don't live in a world where that's possible yet. If we did, then it would be immoral to force people to wear seatbelts. So, yes.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Next up, Steven Steen. Oh gosh, here he is, the benevolent troll, as he likes to hang out here and say things like, quote, "I'd watch virtual reality of James for eternity." Gosh, what does that even mean? Okay, thanks for that, Steven. That's pretty sick. Subtracted, thanks for your super chat. He said, hey, Paul, is there any reason to believe in God?
Is there any reason? I don't find people to be terribly rational. I find they do or they don't.
Interesting.
Oh, I have a question. Would you agree with Pete Inns in our conversation with what his position?
Which one?
The one that none of the classical evidence and arguments actually work to indicate a God. They're more just kind of philosophical word games, and that it's really more about the personal experience in the Bible and not the arguments don't really work.
I don't find, well, if work means somehow overpowering one's will without the use of physical force, I don't find that people believe in that way. I'm not big on, whereas I enjoy thinking about those arguments. I don't believe I believe in God because of those arguments.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Next up, here she is again. Stupid Whore Energy. She says, put to death women, children, and infants in 1 Samuel 15:3. Does this sound like a moral God?
She really wants to adjudicate the morality of God, huh? I had a good friend who his parents were part of a religious group that didn't believe in modern medicine, and he had childhood diabetes. Think that through. He would talk to people in the church and say, well, if you can wear glasses, why can't I get insulin? This obviously for the first years of his life racked his body. Yet at the same time, he would look at me and he would say, my God kills puppy and grandmas. It's a very difficult thing figuring out the whys and ways in this world. And so standing in judgment with God, I don't find it to be a very good game.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Next up, Praise I Am That I Am. Thanks for your super chat. They're giving some pushback against Sarah, or Stupid Whore Energy.
Can't imagine why.
Praise says, please, and he puts it in bold letter, all in caps, read Exodus 17:8. Debunked. Mic drop. So thanks for that, Praise I Am That I Am. Stupid Whore Energy responds in her super chat. Thanks for that. She says, Praise, sorry that doesn't answer a thing. Then Praise comes back with, thanks for your super chat, Praise and Sarah. He says, is this some sort of cool slang? He says, he says, Stupid Whore Energy, it does matter because it's self-defense. So let's see. Gosh, just to try to get through these as much as possible. Forgive me for not reading the passage. I just want to move through because I want to keep my promise to the guests. So I think this is she says, Stupid Whore Energy, thanks for your super chat. She says, Praise, you can't claim self-defense against a baby. And then says, though Jesus repeatedly denounced sin as a kind of moral slavery, said not a word against slavery as a social institution. Why is that? She's how do you like them apples, Paul? She's coming at you again.
Boy. Well, my question would be, is it permissible for someone to choose to sell themselves into slavery?
I would say yes, if they choose it. I don't think most people in the Bible didn't, though.
Well, no, that's right. You became a slave because your city lost or you got in debt, which some might argue that continues to be slavery in this world, especially student loans.
Yep.
Provocative. I know.
Taxation is theft.
Thomas, you're such a wild man. So Stupid Whore Energy, thanks for your super chat. They said, what do you think of the experiments? Okay, so this has to do with when the discussion on free will or determinism came up. that point, they said, what do you think of the experiments that showed muscle activity way before decisions were made, which shows free will doesn't exist? I think that
it's the other way. That's the other way. So the muscle activity and the stuff in the brain we can predict what people are going to choose before they actually choose it. So free will isn't really a coherent concept, but I don't think either of us actually believe in free will, because he said he's more of a Calvinist. So
gotcha. Thank you very much. All right, Matt God, I'm trying to pronounce these. Yeah, all these cool names nowadays, you know, they like to keep it fresh, as they say.
Matt the God, is that what that says?
Yes. Thank you, Thomas. Tom's like the young, cool person. He keeps me updated on what's cool. So thanks, Tom. All right. He says, they say, TJump rocks. You got a fan out there, Tom. They love you. So
thank you.
Subtracted, thanks for your super chat. They said, if God is all powerful and all knowing, wouldn't he find a way to stop moral evil without violating people's free wills? I don't know if they know that you're a Calvinist, Paul.
Or what that means.
Let's see. So I mean, I'll let you.
Most of these people, I don't think, have had children. You learn a lot about this stuff from your children.
So to just rephrase the question, how do Calvinists explain the problem of suffering?
Well, Calvinists understand our responsibility for this broken world, but suffering itself, Alvin Plantinga did a very interesting book. Suffering really isn't so much a philosophical problem, because we imagine we can know things that we can't know. That shouldn't be too incompatible from your position. But suffering is much more of a pastoral problem, because it is part of this temporary mindset that we have. And then when we're suffering, we usually try to figure out who caused our suffering. And figuring out causation in this world is no easy thing.
Gotcha. Thanks so much, gentlemen. And Stupid Horror Energy, thanks.
She's putting down the money today.
She is. She's a huge supporter, and I appreciate.
Well, there you go.
She's a good sport. She's a huge supporter. She bought a shirt for modern. We just put out merch. That's what they call it, right, Tom? That's like the cool word for merchandise.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So we put out merch recently for the channel, and Sarah got a shirt, and the logo was like, Teespring totally screwed it up. It was terrible. Long story short, Sarah, she still wears it with pride. So we appreciate it. Appreciate you, Sarah. See, she says, I'm weird, maybe, but at least I don't shave my legs during debates and listen to Nickelback. You know what, Sarah? You should leave TJump out of this. Tom has not, he didn't do anything to deserve that.
Mean.
So, you can leave.
There is nothing wrong with Nickelback.
He has nothing to do with this, Sarah. Please leave him be. You shave your legs on stream? Man, sick.
Yeah, I don't wear pants on these. They're just, why? I don't need pants. My job doesn't require pants.
Next up, thank you. That's awesome, Thomas. The Heathen, thanks for your question. They said, for Paul, firing a lot of tough ones at you, Paul. They said, since Yahweh was once part of the Canaanite pantheon as a volcano god, isn't your monotheism pretty much pantheism that has been modified to fit the Judeo-Christian doctrine?
Does Allah and God mean the same thing? That'd be my answer.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. Pine Creek, glad to see you, Doug. We've got just 2 more questions and we're going to wrap up. So sorry, folks, we won't get to all of them, but thanks for your patience. And Pine Creek Doug says, if you were not a Christian, would your happiness increase, decrease, or stay the same, Paul?
Decreased. I have no question about that.
Gotcha. Super interesting. Thank you very
Can you
much.
give an example? Like, why would it decrease?
Well, first of all, it's kind of hard to know, obviously, but I derive a great amount of joy thinking about glory, thinking about the fact that, well, one of the things that, we just have a little hour to talk with one another. I think probably if you and I had days or weeks or live, if I could get to know you better, I think we would probably both experience joy and happiness in understanding each other. And as a Christian, I believe that the limitations in this world are temporary. And in fact, they are going to go away. And that thought, that vision in my mind gives me a tremendous amount of joy.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. Next up, just because it was, let's see, I think that was the last one we had said that we would read, but Stupid Horror Energy just fired in her last super chat of the night. Thank you, Sarah. She said, I am Pezazu. So I guess I thought it was the demon from, or the, you remember in Ghostbusters Part 2? No, I don't know. Someone said I got that wrong. That was Zool.
Zool. That was Zool. He was in the fridge.
That's embarrassing. All right. So Roy Lindsay, thanks for your super chat. They just shot it in. Faith offers a false sense of comfort. So yeah, Paul is probably correct. It would decrease happiness. Paul,
faith. Why is it false? I mean, here's the thing. People are free to get happy watching video games. And in fact, if you cultivate a life of believing that service to others will in fact be something that goes on. I mean, why would someone not want me serving my neighbor if I'm deluded about future happiness in that way? I want neighbors like that.
Gotcha. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We are going to wrap up with that and want to say thanks everybody for being here. It's been a pleasure.
One last note. Pazazu is a Mesopotamian god, just so you know.
Gotcha.
Pazuzu, I think, is actually Pazuzu.
Not even in the Ghostbusters at all. All right. So with that, thanks for being here, everybody. This is honestly such a blast. I'm so excited to be back. Whew. Want to let you know, both Paul and Tom have their links right down there in the description. You see down there. You can click on those links and check out their content. So thanks for being here, everybody. And thanks again, Paul and Tom, for being here with us. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks. See you later.
Have a great night, everybody. Take care. Keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable.